Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Scott Rigby. I'm the Assistant City Manager for the City of Wichita. And today, we're excited to welcome Nikki Babcock, our Controller for the City, and Christina Rose, also our Assistant Controller for the City of Wichita. Today, we want to spend a few minutes talking about the new ARPA funds and the city's delegation or designation of funding for workforce development and small business entrepreneurial uses. Earlier this month, the city approved a $10 million of our $72.4 million we were awarded from the American Rescue Plan Act to go towards workforce development or small business and entrepreneurial development. Again, we want to provide an overview of that program and the grant application process that will hopefully help our member groups consider applying for this process. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Nikki, who will run through an overview, and after that, we'll take questions. Nikki.
Thank you, Scott. Yes, like he said, today we're just going to go over the request for grant applications for workforce development and small business entrepreneurial development grants. The city was awarded $72.4 million in American Rescue Plan Act funding in May of 2021. We've received about half of that to date. And the U.S. Treasury has identified eligible uses of the ARPA funds, which includes alleviating the negative economic impacts associated with the pandemic. Recently, on the December 14th City Council meeting, the City Council approved up to $10 million in grants for workforce development and small business entrepreneurial development. Staff have prepared an application and a website which covers the eligibility criteria, the application process, timeline and guidelines, and the applicant's responsibilities. So the purpose of this grant is to help alleviate the negative economic hardships caused by the pandemic. The pandemic disproportionately impacted different segments of the population, including low-income and minority communities, as well as specific industries. This grant process is to get funding into the community quickly to help speed the recovery of the local economy. First, I'll go over the workforce development grants. These are primarily to speed the recovery of industries and disadvantaged communities. How this will aid is through aid in the reopening of businesses and planned expansions or upgrades that might have been delayed due to the pandemic, provide workforce readiness to unemployed workers. This could include child care assistance with transportation to and from job site interviews, and incentives for newly employed workers. And then we also is assistance to accelerate the rehiring process. This could include that could include things just like child care, but anything basically to get people back into the workforce. And then finally, it's also to provide premium pay to eligible essential workers, basically the workers that were on the front line during the pandemic. The second part is small business and entrepreneurial grants. This is to address the financial challenges caused by the pandemic and encourage recovery through increased business activity. This is through maybe assisting in new business startups and expansions, restore staffing to pre-pandemic staffing levels, allow businesses to retain existing staff that without assistance they might have to otherwise lay off, again to provide premium pay to eligible essential workers, and also to mitigate financial hardship. This includes like declines in revenues and impacts of periods of business closure. If you're interested in more about what premium pay and essentials workers are, we do have more information on our website that specifically details those criteria. Next, on this slide, we'll show our application process timeline. On December 22nd, we got our website up and notice for application for funding was issued. Proposals for applications will be due on February 2nd at noon or 12 p.m. And then by mid-February, we're planning to review the proposals and score them by a panel of city staff. And then about a week later, organizations will be notified of a recommended award. And then those agreements will be reviewed and approved by the City Council in mid-March. So I'm going to go over different parts of the application process guidelines. This grant is geared towards nonprofit organizations, public-private partnerships, and educational entities. Applications must serve the residents and businesses of the city. Individuals and entities that were not in operation for at least a year at the time of application are not eligible to apply. Some of the application guidelines is that the application must be either for workforce development or small business entrepreneurial development. The applications need to address resources needed, timelines, risks, and equity considerations. Budgets should be well planned and itemized, but they're not expected to be exhaustive or granular. And then the timeline shouldn't be specific dates. Timelines in your application should be in terms of days, weeks, and months instead. All the awards grants must be spent by July 1st, 2023. ARPA funds, as many of you are aware, those have to be spent or encumbered by December 31st, 2024, and then fully spent by December 31st, 2026. However, the city has put our deadline for this grant to be July 1st, 2023. That way we can ensure that if any funds are not spent at the end of that term, it gives us adequate time to be able to open up a new application timeline and be able to award those funds and allow people to get them expended. That way we don't let any of our ARPA funds go to waste. And next I'll go over some more general eligibility criteria. Again, the organization type must be an existing nonprofit organization, public-private partnership, or an educational entity serving residents in the city of Wichita. The organization must turn in their most recent Form 990 or tax return to verify their organization type to the city with their application. Again, population served and experience. The proposed programs should have a documented history of directly serving Wichita residents, and qualified applicants must have at least 1 year of recent experience in the delivery of services to the specific targeted groups. Financial review. Qualified applicants must also provide a copy of their organization's most recent externally conducted audit or review. This will help us in our subrecipient monitoring evaluation. And again, a complete application is required, so please make sure to read all the questions and fill it out in its completeness. Another thing to note is these are federal funds, and therefore we want to make sure that entities are aware that if they expend more than $750,000 in a single year of federal funds, they are required to have a single audit performed, and a copy of that single audit must be turned into the city. Further, these ARPA funds may not be used as a match for another grant. I'm just going to go over a couple of the applicant responsibilities. If you look at on our city website, which we can show later, we have a whole list on page 4 of the guidelines of what the applicant responsibilities are. Some of these are to comply with city policies and procedures as required. Examples of this would be the city's purchasing policy and the city's subrecipient policy and evaluation. An organization is also to supply their ethics and conflict of interest policies to the city with their application. They're to complete the project for what they submitted in accordance with the approved scope and in the agreed upon timeline. They need to be in good standing with the city of Wichita and the state of Kansas. Basically, this means that there's not any outstanding debts or that are overdue. And then they must also certify that their organization is not suspended or debarred with the U.S. government. And we actually have a link to where you can go look to confirm that your organization's not. And that is also in our application guidelines. So now I'm going to go over how do you submit an applications. All applications must be submitted in the format provided by the City of Wichita. We've provided the application form in both PDF and Excel format. Your organization may choose whichever one suits your needs best. And the application can be found at the following link. It can also be found by navigating to the ARPA Grants webpage and scrolling down the website to the section that is titled How to Submit an Application. And then if you expand that, then you'll see the information that is on this slide. All applications and any attachments that are required need to be emailed to arpa@wichita.gov. Now I'll go over a little bit of the application review. So on February 2nd, once the applications close, a panel will be formed by the city staff to review those applications. And that panel will review the grant applications using a scoring matrix that is consistent with the application criteria. This scoring matrix is also available on our website. And then based on the results of the panel review and the available funding, recommendations for grant awards will be made to the city council. A thing to point out is people may not be awarded the exact amount or amount that they request in the application. It just depends on how many applications we get and how the scoring criteria. In summary, grant applications are now open to the public. Again, the application period closes February 2nd at 12 p.m. And the city's application guidelines, scoring matrix, questions and answers, and more are available on the city's website at the following link. And now we are open to questions.
Thanks, Nikki. Megan, are you going to lead us off with questions that you hear from the public?
I am. So we have taken some questions prior to this broadcast, but if you have questions, you can either comment on our YouTube stream, send it to us on Facebook or Twitter, and we'll try to answer it here. Nikki provided a link to the ARPA grant page earlier in this presentation. There's also a submission form for additional questions there if we don't get to your question during this broadcast. So the first one we have is from a nonprofit organization here in Wichita. Since the funds are reimbursable, our nonprofit organization is concerned about the risk. If we already had the money, we wouldn't need the ARPA funds. Taking out a short-term loan is possible, but also risky, because if funds are not allowed but spent, it will put the organization in crisis. Is there a way to reduce the risk?
Yes, there is. The U.S. Treasury has put out several documents about ARPA funds and its allowable uses. The city has several of these documents up on our website, and they can be of great use to any organization considering applying for ARPA funds. The city panel reviewing the applications will also be reviewing for unallowed costs in the budget that has been submitted. And if an applicant is awarded funds, the city will also be able to answer any questions throughout the grant period. Thus, if you have a question, an entity has a question on a cost at any time throughout their grant period, they just need to contact their contact at the city, and we'll help them work through whether that cost is eligible or not.
Thanks, Nikki. We also heard that some are confused by the different deadlines of the application process, specifically related to how soon they have to encumber those funds. So for example, if they requested funding for staff positions, are they funded through 2026?
This grant period performance is only through July 1st, 2023. And definitely with all the great dates out there, it is easy to get confused. All the funds for this grant must be expended by July 1st, 2023. And again, this is to allow the city adequate time to identify unspent grant funds and then grant those to other entities and get that funding expended or encumbered by December 31st, 2024, with all those funds having to be spent by December 31st, 2026. And that's in accordance with the ARPA interim final rule.
Thank you. We got a question about, will this presentation be posted online? Could you tell people where they can go to find it?
Yes, this presentation, there'll be a link on our ARPA website, on the city's website. We have links if you just navigate to the main city website. We have a banner that scrolls with hot topics that we have here at the city, and there is a banner on there for the ARPA grants webpage.
Wonderful. And that website is where they can reach out for more additional questions. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. On the ARPA grants webpage, we actually, if you scroll down the webpage, there's actually an area called How to Submit a Question. And in there, you just have to click a button and you enter your name, an email address if you have it, and then you enter your question and it will come to us, and then we will periodically upload questions and the city's responses on that same webpage.
Thank you. Can a Wichita resident apply for this funding if their business is outside the city limits? Perhaps if they have a chain and funding will be used for one location in Wichita, but also for their businesses outside of Wichita?
The ARPA grant is specifically to serve residents and businesses of the city of Wichita. There are other funding sources, such as through Sedgwick County, that will be available for outside the city limits.
What about if a Wichita organization is in Wichita, but the owner is a non-Wichita resident?
Again, it's to serve Wichita businesses and Wichita residents. So as long as they're doing that, they would be. But again, the target for these grant funds is for nonprofit organizations, public-private partnerships, and educational entities, which it's anticipated that those funds would then be further dispersed to other organizations throughout the city.
Wonderful. We are getting some questions on YouTube. I'm going to read those. If those watching have additional questions, please feel free to write those in now. Does the nonprofit organization have to hold a specific 501c classification to apply?
No, as long as they're a nonprofit organization and they submit their Form 990 or tax return, and we can verify that they are a nonprofit and that they otherwise meet the eligibility requirements, then they will be eligible to be reviewed by the panel.
Thank you. Earlier, we touched on hiring back pre-pandemic staffing levels, including training. What kind of documentation do organizations need to ensure pre-pandemic levels are met, or does the applicant have to define this?
Actually, the interim final rule defines what date your pre-pandemic staffing levels are as of. And I can go ahead and put that specific date out on our website. And so it would be however many employees you had employed as of that time on that payroll for that covers that pay period.
Wonderful. If an organization is applying for a consortium, a group of organizations, do they have to provide all of the documents for each of those organizations, or can it just be from one organization?
Megan, great question, and I think that's one of those that we will need to dig in deeper. I would say up front is whoever's going to be the lead organization who submits the application will be definitely required. But if they're substantial partners, my understanding, I think we'll need to discuss that, Nikki, is what additional information we may need from, I'll call it the rest of the consortium or collaboration.
Wonderful. Could you touch a little bit on a definition for public-private partnerships and what that would entail?
Let Scott handle this one.
So the question is public-private partnerships?
Yes.
So for example, it could be one of our nonprofits that already work and existing in the area, but know that there's specific needs, specific businesses or types of businesses. That could be a public-private partnership. It could be a university teaming up with a certain industry that has certain businesses within industry to partner together to submit an application.
But they would have to have a nonprofit entity involved, correct?
Yeah, ideally that nonprofit would be the lead organization to submit the application.
Wonderful.
Again, our goal is to get dollars to get out to our nonprofit educational institutions who then, I'll call it, touch that front line of services.
Wonderful. Could you go over for us one more time the reimbursement process? I think some were confused.
Yeah, definitely. And once we get closer to when the actual reimbursement comes out, we'll put some more guidelines out with more specifics. But basically, what it is those funds have to be expended before they can be requested from the city to be paid. So, and then we'll most likely have a specific report that we'll put up on our website for the subrecipients to report their expenditures, along with any additional support we need to make sure to review that those costs are allowable. So.
Thank you. So you've gone over that this is for nonprofits. What about cultural arts organizations that might be nonprofits? Are they able to apply for funding?
Yeah, they are available to apply for funding. Again, they must demonstrate experience of a negative economic hardship that their entity or those that they serve have experienced, and also show, and who are proposing programs that will further workforce development and or small business entrepreneurial development.
Wonderful, thank you. We're getting some questions about the auditing process. So we have several clear deadlines in this, but if an org is in the process of completing a third-party audit and it's not completed by the deadline, can the application be made with a note and then the audit will be submitted when it's completed?
Yes, that will definitely be acceptable. If they've also had an audit, if they're currently undergoing an audit or a review, and they've also had one the previous year, they can also submit that, and again, just let us know that the other one will be forthcoming once they have it finished.
Wonderful, thank you. Could you explain a little bit more about the criteria required for a third-party audit? If it hasn't been conducted, and it wouldn't in the time of the app closing, just to reiterate, would the applicant still be eligible if they have that note?
If it's in process,
If it's in
and they didn't have a
process.
previous one? Yeah, I think as long as they can get it to us before the funds would be awarded, we'd probably want to have that before that date, so.
Thank you. We have a question. Since some nonprofit organizations are deemed as exempt, they'll not be required to file a 990 or tax return. Would they be eligible with exemption paperwork?
I think we definitely will take that into account, yes. So I think they would just need to, in place of those, let us know that they are exempt and provide that paperwork from like the IRS that would show that they're exempt.
Thank you. Does the grant allow advance funds to be distributed?
We are not allowing advance fund. It's a reimbursement basis grant.
We have a question. Can a fiscal sponsor be used for applications? This is, I believe, in conjunction with an arts organization.
I guess I would need to know more about what the fiscal sponsor is.
So that
Just-
would be something they'd reach out to staff for more
Yes.
information on.
Yeah, if they could go on our website
Submit that
and
question.
submit a question and maybe
Yep.
submit some more details on it, and that would allow us also a contact to be able to then reach out to them, and if we had any additional questions, to be able to answer that better.
Great. Will you only do one full reimbursement or several small reimbursements?
I think we'll put more information about that, but I would think our preference would be to do continual reimbursements and not wait till the end. As entities expend the funds, we would like to get those monies back out into the community as soon as possible.
Wonderful. I've got one more question, but again, if you're tuning in and something comes to you, please go to that submission form on our website. Staff will get with you based on any questions that you have. Our last question, unless one comes in through the YouTube, can this funding be used to start up a nonprofit organization?
Directly from the city, it cannot. However, if they're working through a nonprofit or a public-private partnership or an educational entity that has applied for it, and that is part of their application, and it meets the ARPA criteria, then I would think so.
Thank you. All right, we have one final question, a clarification. On the spending, are you saying that the funds that the city will grant to the applicants must be allocated by July 22, 23, or is it the funds of the grant recipients received must be spent by that time?
We have it as spent at the moment, so, yep.
Okay.
And that's just so as make sure that, let's say someone did encumber it or something like that, and something fell through, then if they didn't end up spending those, then we might miss out on being able to get that money into the community. So it must be spent.
Great, thank you again. If you have any additional questions, go to that website. All right, Scott, I think that's all we have today. Do you have any parting words for us?
I do, Megan. Thank you, and thanks everybody for tuning in, and especially thank you for Nikki and Christina. They're really the brains of this operation, as you can tell from this event. But I do want to clarify, because I often get this question, we got this question from council, is we've set aside $10 million, and generally people think that's $5 million for workforce development and $5 million for small business entrepreneurial, and really that's not the case. The goal is we're going to try and fund as many qualified applications If the case is we have more demand for workforce development, and let's say the funding request is for $7 million, we'll go to $7 million, and the balance would then be going over to small business entrepreneurial, or vice versa. So the goal is to get these dollars out to the best qualified and most effective type of programs, and not so much we have a budget allocation for $5 million for one and a $5 million for another one. So just want to share that with you. I appreciate everybody's work and time to put this together, and obviously we're going to have this posted on the website. Please, if you have additional questions, send those in to us, and our goal is to turn those around fairly quickly. We do want to remind, if you submit a question, just because it's a public nature and because now the applications are open, we will post answers across to everybody, the answers for any specific questions, so everybody can see the response. With that, Megan, thanks for hosting us.
All right, thank you, and we will see you next time. Again, if you have any additional questions, please send them in.